Yet NATO hung out the promise of membership to Ukraine. From 1914 to 2022, they trained the Ukrainian military to be a de facto proxy of NATO, provided them some of the finest military training. They had great leaders. They had great equipment. They were well organized. They were big. We're talking 160,000 active duty with up to 600, 700,000 trained reservists. This was the Ukrainian military. And what's happened to it? It's being destroyed on the battlefield as we speak. They're losing a battalion's worth of men a day. They're going to lose this war to the Russians. And yet, and the reason why is because Ukraine bought into the premise that it could join NATO, that this was a good move, that Russia wasn't serious when Russia said that eastward expansion of NATO represents an existential threat to us. So now, in the midst of this, where Russia said, and has been saying since 2009, that if you continue to push for Ukrainian membership, we will go to war. And that war will result in the dismemberment of Ukraine, the destruction of Ukraine as a modern nation state. Nobody believed Russia until now. And yet, in the midst of this, we have Finland and Sweden saying, maybe we should join NATO. I don't know how you define eastward expansion of NATO other than saying Finland joining NATO. It's to the east. It brings it right up to the Russian border. In 1941, they allied themselves with Nazi Germany. And they allowed Nazi Germany to use Finnish soil as a springboard to attack Leningrad, surround Leningrad, subject more than 1 million Soviet citizens to death by starvation. They allowed Finnish soil to be used as a springboard to allow German troops to attack into northern Russia to try and seize strategic ports facilities in Archangels and Murmansk, the Kola Peninsula. And they did this for 3 years. And then here's the other lesson, Finland. You lost. The Russians beat you, man. The Soviets, they crushed you. They're on the verge of just swamping through you, taking you down, absorbing you, making you disappear as a nation state, but you sued for peace. And the Soviets said, okay, if you evict the Germans, we'll come up with a negotiated treaty. So the Finns turned on their German allies, kicked them out, and then in 1949, the Soviets signed a treaty. And here's an important part of that treaty. In exchange for allowing Finland to exist as a nation state, because it should never be allowed to exist as a nation state because you fought alongside the Nazis and you killed 1 million Soviet citizens. But in exchange for letting you survive as a nation state, you have to promise to be neutral in perpetuity. I don't know what the Finnish word for perpetuity is, but in English, it means forever. Neutral forever. Now, people say, well, you can't hold Finland to that. Yes, you can, and Russia will. And it's not as though Russia's been dictating unreasonable terms. When the Soviet Union collapsed and Russia re-upped this treaty, Russia had no problem with Finland joining, the European Union if they wanted to, if they want to join the European Commission, if they want to be part of Europe economically, go, do it. But you can never allow your soil, to be used as a potential basing point for foreign troops to threaten Russia. That's sort of a given. And if you decide you're going to do that, you lose the right to exist instantly. It's going to happen. Finland needs to understand that Russia means what it says. When Russia says no eastward expansion of NATO, that it represents an existential threat to Russia, they mean it, especially when we're talking about Finnish soil so close to Russia's #2 city, St. Petersburg. Finnish soil so close to the Kola Peninsula, which has strategic value to the Russians. They're not going to let NATO operate on Finnish soil. They're not going to let Finland become part of NATO. Is this not clear? Did Ukraine not educate anybody about anything?